Sox on 35th is next. Doors open on the left.
That's Jordan Lazowski. That's me, and that's Nick. How's it going, everybody? This is your host, Coughlin, and welcome to the Sox on 35th podcast. We are back with another exciting episode covering your Chicago White Sox. I pulled that off. As always, I'm joined by Jordan Lazowski and Nik Gaur. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
It's been a few weeks since we've all been together. Nice to see your smiling faces. I'm sure I will have some complaints about that at some point in the episode, and I'll regret ever saying that. But until then, it's nice to say hello to both of you.
Yeah, feels the same on my end. It's been a while to have the three of us, and kind of nice. I think Duke was just saying this before he went on, but it's nice to have this episode right in between the 16-game gauntlet with no off days, and it's almost like we're just like the team, like we're using the off day ourselves to get back on track here. So before we go do the usual intro here, I do have one quick question for Jordan. Were you aware that Drew Romo is a big Notre Dame fan?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
And now that I know that, I would have been so much more obnoxious about it beforehand. I had no idea, actually. This is a great fun fact and makes me like him even more.
I didn't know that's why you liked him, but now I get it.
So, like, anyone who's seen my stuff, I have a penchant to be like, if you hate a player too much, I'm gonna be like, all right, is it really worth it how much the general fan base hates a player? And then I'll be like, let's look into it. And then I'll posit the idea that, hey, maybe it's not completely worth it to hate this player as much as everybody does. And everyone's like, no, you're crazy, whatever. And then I'm like, you know what? Fine, I'm going to love this player. That's how I ended up liking Jordan Leisure. That's how I ended up defending Drew Romo. This is how it works. So if you want the formula, there it is. It had nothing to do with Notre Dame, but had I known, it might have.
Yeah, I mean, Drew Romo, Notre Dame, it kind of adds up,
Don't finish. Nope, don't fit. Nope, we're moving on. Don't even finish that sentence.
Both vastly overrated with very little competition. Anyway, it's great to hear, gentlemen. We have quite a bit to cover in this episode, but before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you hear podcasts. Also, be sure to check out the website, soxon35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at soxon35th. I love trashing Notre Dame and not giving Laz an opportunity to defend it, and it even gets better when it comes to Drew Romo.
So, like when I said I was gonna regret saying it was nice to see you both at some point, it took 3 minutes and 43 seconds, just to be clear.
That's fine. That's fine. I was telling myself before we recorded a little bit earlier, I was kind of thinking about it. It's like, do me and Laz get into the Romo, Jake Rogers discussion? And then I'm like, dude, we're talking about nickels and dimes here. Like, in a real baseball sense, they are both not worth arguing over. So I'm not going to do it today.
What's a shame though, is that we haven't had something to have that strong of a debate about in a while. And I agree, if we're gonna rehash the old Jordan Duke arguing days, it's not worth Drew Romo versus Jake Rogers. That's I can get worked up for the people, but I can't get worked up for that one. So
yeah, it's just a tough sell to me. Plus, honestly, dude, our Twitter arguments have gotten so much better that by the time our argument's done, by the time we get to the podcast, I'm like, I think we kind of got the best of it out already. I think we gotta be careful about those Twitter arguments getting too far. We gotta start saving it for the
shows.
Oh man. But anyway, again, let's nickels and dimes, not worth talking about. What is worth talking about is the White Sox have finally finished their stretch of 16 games in 16 days. Can't imagine how great the players feel today to have the off day. And it's twofold, because outside of playing baseball, it's like, I don't have to be on TV in front of an audience today. I can just be an absolute bum on the team plane. I can go to my hotel room and hang out in my underwear. I don't have to present a front, but a guy who doesn't present a front at all and is just 100% him is Sam Antonacci. I don't. We'll get into like what we've got on the pod here, but did you guys happen to see his DH quote? Because I thought that
Oh,
was
it was
just the
awesome.
greatest thing
Yep.
ever.
He's like, yeah, I loved it. I'm never doing it again, though.
Like,
just incredible.
Yeah, and like I always love like when they do like the Friday features with the players, and they always show the guys in the dugouts, you know, kind of chumming up in before the game and everything like that, and having conversations, and it's always Sam just looking there, just this completely stone cold, miserable looking face, like I'm ready to go to war. Like, can we just start the game already?
I love that they mic'd him up too for a game, and they're like, we couldn't even get 2 minutes of content out of this. It was just like, I'm mic'd up, okay, and saying a couple things here and there. Like, and that's just the consummate professional when it comes to a baseball player, right there.
Yeah, you can tell he stays intense, but he saves it all for the clubhouse, I guess, because it's obvious everyone loves him, and him and Benintendi have some tight tape filled bond going on. But speaking of which, what are the vibes right now? The White Sox go 9-7 on this 16 game run. Just quick breakdown: they take 1 of 3 from Cincinnati, sweep Detroit, one of 3 from the Cubs, but in essence tied the season series, so it wasn't all bad. Plus, we got the last game to be able to win it, which was, man, that felt like a playoff series, didn't it? I mean, the fact we've never played in the playoffs, but there was some sugar, spice, and everything freaking nice in that series. And then you have the one game in Atlanta that nobody really cared about because it was a makeup game that just felt unnecessary, but it is obviously necessary. And then finishing out strong, taking, 2 or 3 from the Mets and 2 or 3 from Texas. So coming out of that, besides Tristan Peters, which we'll get to, what are the vibes coming out of this 16 game stretch?
When this stretch started was, I think, the last time we were all together, and we said we all had different opinions on like what a good record would be coming out of it. I said 9-7, and they went 9-7 over that stretch. So like, I'm not disappointed, but it's like the way in which they went 9-7, it feels like it could have been better, if that makes sense. Like losing 2 of 3 to Cincinnati, that's where you're like, all right, you got to get 2 of 3 in those types of series. You made up for it by sweeping Detroit, which I didn't think they would do. The Cubs series was going to be a toss up either way. It was probably good we didn't record a podcast right after those first couple games, because that was just some poor decision making times 1,000 at certain points in those games. Atlanta is what it is, and you kind of bounce back from Texas. So like it yes, they're only 2.5 games up, but the Angels blew a couple stupid games against Cleveland this week that could have forced it to be 4.5. I'm most mad at myself when we did that last poll with the fans of like, which team are you most worried about? Tigers, Cleveland, and Twins. And I let myself be convinced Tigers. It's always the Guardians. Why would I ever change it's always Cleveland. Why I'm mad at myself for letting myself get convinced that it was gonna be Detroit. It's always Cleveland. It's always going to be Cleveland. And that's why I'm so frustrated. I think looking back, it's like, well, damn, they buried the Tigers. They got a chance to bury the Twins. Cleveland still looms because of course they do.
Yeah, it's still kind of funny to me, like all the like group chats I'm in that were freaking out over the last 2 weeks. Like, oh no, the Twins just won again, the Tigers just won again, and it's like people forgot about Cleveland, like you said. But no, the vibes I think are pretty good considering they made it through the stretch with a winning record. And everyone talks about the schedule being easier the rest of the season. I don't fully buy into that. Not that I think it's a difficult schedule, but more so it's like the old like Hawk Harrell saying like it's not who you play, it's when you play them thing. Like the Mets coming into that series last week and were red hot. So taking 2 out of those 3 games, and they were well played games. That was impressive to me. And then all these teams the Sox play in the next few weeks, like the Twins are not a bad team. Houston obviously is solid. I mean, they're below 500, but they're not much worse than the White Sox record wise. So I don't think you need to be, discounting, I would say, or downplaying maybe what's coming up. But being 2.5 up, getting through this stretch, mostly intact, seems like everyone's fairly healthy. A lot of the pitchers look tired, but the position players might be tired, but there's no big long term thing that came from this stretch. That's the biggest positive to me, just because you never know with all these games they're being asked to play. But yeah, I'm also happy that they won the last two series, kind of ending on that positive note, going into this more important stretch now, where I think it's Minnesota, then Houston, then Minnesota again. Like those are 9 or 10 pretty important games, both to maybe bury the Twins, but also for Houston, that potential 2 seed. If the White Sox get that far, that could end up being really important. So it's hard to complain with what they did. Obviously, blowing that game against the Reds was really annoying, but other than that, it was a well played 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think especially that Houston series, it really does feel like almost like a bit of a playoff preview. If you don't, sorry if you're not about getting ahead of yourselves a little bit, but yeah, no, it's always been Cleveland. I mean, I'm not gonna dunk on you, Laz. I'm not gonna dunk on anybody who was worried about the Tigers or the Twins.
I'm just stupid. Like, it is what it is. I'm dumb.
No,
like.
I mean, Detroit did. I mean, they kind of had that, like Scooble who needs them type run. And like, I don't do Detroit just had no worry from me from the jump on this season. I mean, even before we kind of had a realistic idea that the White Sox were going to be in the running this year, I'd never had an idea that Detroit was going to be the team. Cleveland, it's not that I'm necessarily thinking there's some sort of powerhouse that's going to come out of nowhere and just kind of sneak up on us. It puts more in perspective of how much the season for the White Sox is in their own hands at this point. Like, you need to handle business against the Twins, who again, the Twins do not, I can't take the Twins seriously because they refuse to just tear it down. They're going to be 3 years too late, and it's going to be wonderful when they finally do tear it down and get scraps for what they still have. But they're going to play us tough. They still have, the Mickey Mouse idea that they're going to compete with us. So they're going to bring it every day. Cleveland is still the team that you still have to hang around with because they didn't necessarily do terrible during the stretch. They're still very much hanging in there. I mean, we can root for the Angels all we want to handle business for us. But at the end of the day, whether it's against Cleveland or whether it's against, the Twins in Houston moving forward, it's in our hands. Like, we have to handle business. We need to take this rest day seriously as we're reloading now. Like, this was a tough 16 run. We got through it. We need the absolute best moving forward. We need, disciplined at bats. We need good defense. The boneheaded moves that kind of hurt us earlier and even in the middle part of the season, defensively and different things like that they just got to tighten up. Everybody has to come to the ballpark with the same expectation that, sure, we want to win. That's what should be on everybody's mind. But we need to be competitive in every single one of these games moving forward, just to kind of not only take full control of the AL Central moving forward and not have to worry about what Cleveland's doing, but to kind of start getting in that playoff mindset of, there are tough games in the playoffs where you feel like you're supposed to win and you don't. You have to just come back from it the next game and show that even in losses, you're playing tough enough that the team has to worry about you on the next game.
And I think part of it too is it's the old adage, like, it's not about when you get hot, or it's about when you get hot, like, at the end of the day. And I kind of feel like if there's any silver lining in all this, it feels like Cleveland's getting hot a little too early. They've won 7-8 straight, but the Sox are still holding water there. Like they are still 2.5 games up, despite this hot stretch that Cleveland is going on. And you have a chance to keep them there if you take care of business against Minnesota. I know they just called up Walker Jenkins, so that's going to be a concern. But you have a chance to bury Minnesota, just like you buried Detroit, and you still have got 3 games against Cleveland. If you can keep a 1.5, 2-game lead, even up to 3-game lead by that stretch, or that 3-game stretch where you play Cleveland, then just bury them. Take 2 of 3 and hopefully sweep them, but at the very least take 2 of 3, and that's going to be too much to overcome in a week and a half. So you're at this point where, yes, it sucks that they continue to creep a little bit, not really go away. Like, yeah, they probably should have lost a couple games, but we're getting hot right now in an 8-game stretch, and I think they really only made up 2 games in an 8-game winning streak. That is a good thing for the White Sox, who still haven't gone on an elongated hot streak at any point recently, at least, and it makes you feel good that Maybe everyone catches their breath. You get a little bit of a roll going against Minnesota and see what happens.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And you brought up Walker Jenkins coming up. I'm assuming the corresponding move will be Byron Buxton to the injured list. And if they don't place him on the injured list, I don't think he'll play in this series this weekend based on what I've read. So that's like the silver lining is, yeah, Jenkins might be really good, but not having Buxton in that lineup would also be a huge loss for the Twins against us. And another thing you're saying about like when you get hot, I agree with that too. It's actually something every year I get in the same debate with some of my friends who are Yankees fans. We're like, every year in like May or June for the last like 6 years, there's been a point where the Yankees look unbeatable. There'll be like 20 games with 500. Every single batter in the lineup has an OPS of like 850 or better. And then every year they fall off. And it's like, I appreciate that this year's version of the White Sox has been a good team, but they've basically been 500 for like 3 months in a row, which is actually fine with me to your point, because I like that they're not peaking right now. Like ideally that starts to happen in like mid to late September, because then it would carry into October in theory. I know it's hard to like actually plan for that. And you do have some players like Vargas and Peters who obviously are on quite the hot streaks right now. But yeah, I look at the fact that Cleveland's on this winning streak, but like you said, it only made up a couple of games on us. I look at that as a huge positive because it tells me that this White Sox team has a lot of untapped potential too. We haven't really talked about the pitching today, but the pitching has looked really tired for a couple of weeks. Who knows if that bounces back a little bit and September could end up looking pretty good for the Sox. Like it could be the big run that we've kind of been waiting for the last couple of months.
The pitching thing is a huge concern with me right now. You've been working with 3 starters for a few weeks now, like, and it's, yeah, I can go back to the old debate, and we will a little bit about the trade deadline and things like that, but I think Vince, I'm gonna butcher this one, like Vince Diana, I don't know. He said it in the chat. I feel good where we're at, but what's keeping me from feeling great is Martin Burke and Castillo. Burke, I do think looks a little tired. I would love to find a way to skip one of his starts. I don't think Houston is a great road matchup for him. Just a hitter's ballpark, gives up a bunch of homers. It hasn't looked great the past couple starts. I'd love if they could skip that start somehow. I don't think they can, but I'd like to. But you're hoping that Martin gets healthy, Castillo bounces back a little bit, and you can just run out a solid 5 again at a certain point. There are games I'm like, I don't know who the starter is, and you're trying to track it out, and they're in a tough spot with pitching. And I think ultimately that's what has to be the concern, but you have to continue to try different things. You can't just run Urquidy back out there just because. Like, try something else. Try a Drew Thorpe, I guess. Like, you're going to have to get creative. I know we've talked about that a lot, but you can't just keep running Sean Newcomb out there to save everybody's butts. Like, you do have to have a different solution.
Well, that you don't want to run up Newcomb's innings, especially if you're going to try to make a deep playoff run here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it all kind of falls into, and I feel like for the last 2 months here, we've been kind of really eyeing up September as the time where this is where guys have to kind of like really figure it out. This is where guys have to start getting hot. Even to your homage, Laz, where you're talking about, it's when you get hot. That's what you're hoping for some of these guys. Obviously guys like Colson Montgomery, who's struggling really bad with strikeouts right now, or Munetaka Murakami, who loved having him back the second he was back from IL, but you almost wonder if it took him a little bit. It maybe should have taken him a little bit more time to come back than it did. But obviously, a team in the playoff hunt, a guy like Munetaka Murakami is going to want to come back, and that goes for a lot of guys on the roster. If Sean Burke misses a start, that's totally fine. This is the time in this next month. This isn't. You have to do this weird balance of trying to be competitive because you still have a division to win. You can't count your chickens before they hatch, but this is also a time where guys have to really kind of lock in and figure things out. Like the problems you've had during the season, like when Davis Martin returns, he needs to get things figured out. He has a couple starts to be able to do that. Luis Castillo, as we're going to talk about a little bit later in this podcast, he's going to have to get things figured out. And these guys have the opportunity this last month of the season to really do that. And I think that's going to dictate who ends up getting called up once the roster gets moved to 28. And it's going to dictate who's going to be, what our set lineups are going to be in the playoffs and what our set rotation is going to be in the playoffs and how we're going to utilize the starting pitchers that we don't bring into the starting rotation in the playoffs. So there's a lot of question marks still there, but this is the time to figure it out. don't take any series lightly, don't take any game lightly, but really start to try to tinker with your stuff and see if you can get hot at the right time, and at a certain point it's going to hit. We talk about innings limits with pitching and everything like that. It's going to hit a point where you're going to have to accept that we're going to recover in the off season, brother. Like we're going to start having to make a run here. And I think you're going to see it as like, if a guy like Sean Burke misses a start now, you're not going to see that for the rest of the run here, because it's going to be like, okay, it's lock-in mode. We're going to try to pitch all the way into the postseason here and see how far we can go. And I think you're going to see that a lot. But bring it to the original point about Murakami and Montgomery. How do you feel about where this lineup's at right now? Is there some things you'd maybe tinker? I think there's one glaring one of a guy that I think should be put into a higher spot in the lineup, but I want to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, I said it yesterday or 2 days ago. Like, I don't know why Tristan Peters is still hitting 6th or 7th in this lineup right now, to be honest with you. And a common retort to that has been, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But what you got to understand is, number one, these are big Major League Baseball players. These are big boys, and they know what they're doing. So, like, you don't need to worry about, the mental aspect of more pressure. No, he's a big boy. He can figure it out. He's getting paid handsomely to figure it out. So I would move him up, and I would slide Murakami around a little bit too. There are like 3 players you really want right now. With games on the line, or like when you think about a lineup, right? You're thinking, who do I want to get the potential 4th at bat the most, right? Like, it's probably Antonacci, especially with runners in scoring position. It's probably Vargas, and right now it's probably Peters. If there are 3 guys in the lineup you want hitting with the game on the line, or you need to get something started, you want those guys getting the at-bats. I don't know if you do something like Antonacci, Peters, Vargas, top 3. I think that might get a little aggressive. I think you can probably just slide Peters maybe in at that 5 hole and kind of be good with that. But 7 is too far down, because you're putting outs in front of him right now. Like Montgomery does not look good. I don't think Braden's looked good enough. Braden Montgomery's looked good enough to be in that 4-5 spot. And I think you still leave Murakami in the top 5. So I think that's how that would work out for me.
Yeah, I actually don't necessarily agree with the idea that you have to do something right now. I mean, it depends on who you're talking about, right? Coulson Montgomery has been on this slump, if you want to call it that, for like 60 games. And they've already moved him down from like 4 to 6 or something when he's in that lineup. I'm fine with moving him down again to like 7 or 8. That I don't care. Murakami, however, has been slumping for like 7 games. So I wouldn't put it on the same level. And in that stretch, I have it pulled up here. It's 8 games, his last 36 plate appearances. But in that time, his BABIP is 118, and he's still hitting the ball hard. It's not like he's, hitting weak choppers and striking out 50% of the time. His strikeout rate went from 33% to 38%, which is high, but it's a 36 plate appearance sample. So I'm not worried about him. He just needs to get more time, essentially. So I would not really move him around unless the 8-game slump becomes, like 15 plus, then sure. But I could definitely see the argument for moving Peters up and Coulson down a little bit. That's totally fine, especially because once you get past, like, essentially once you get past Vargas, every hitter 4 through 7 or 8 in this lineup is pretty interchangeable in terms of like they have the same OPS pretty much. So if you want Peters to be that guy in like the 5 or 6 slot, by all means go ahead, because I agree with Jordan that Braden Montgomery, while overall is having a decent year, he doesn't need to be the cleanup hitter either. So I'm fine with that for sure.
The only concern I have at Murakami is it hasn't been a great August. Even if this specific stretch has been the worst part, it hasn't been a great August in totality, to where it's like, all right, if you're at this point now where you almost want to play the hot hand a little bit, even if it's, hey, you leave Peters up there for a week and then switch it again. And it might simply be Antonacci, Peters, Vargas, Mune. And that's your top 4. It's like you don't ruffle the feathers that much. Or shuffle the cards that much necessarily. It's just more so, I'm going to play this hot hand while it's here and move it back down when needed. Like I'm just more so exploring it from that standpoint. And again, you don't know how a clubhouse reads that. You don't know how you don't want to, like, I trust Venable to be able to, if nothing else, I trust Venable to be able to understand like how a move will affect what has been created here. I'm just coming at it from the standpoint of playing the hot hand. You can bet Peters 4, honestly, for all I care. If you want to leave it like Antonacci, Murakami, Vargas, Peters, like he's put up similar numbers to Benintendi in terms of runners in scoring position, things like that. Like you could stack those guys that way. And I've never had an issue with Benintendi being 4, even though he's not a typical power hitter. So I think you can. It's the hot hand idea of like if he's having a hot stretch, get him as many at bats as possible.
So I guess I'm trying to wane the idea of getting too much into the hot stretch just because of how hot and cold most of this lineup's been most of the year. And a guy that really isn't getting brought up after being red hot to start this month is a guy like Chase Mydroth, and I don't necessarily want to sacrifice his spot in the lineup as well, especially with how much we kind of lack right-handers. But basically, a lineup I want to see us test out is Antonacci 1, obviously. I want to see Vargas at 2. I think his bat's way too valuable. I think he's the one who starts to really deserve the nod to getting that extra at bat. And then honestly, when you look at Antonacci and Vargas and their ability to both get on base, I like the idea of Benintendi or Grichuk at that spot with how well they've gotten runners in, especially Benintendi. Why not really start putting to the test Benintendi scoring runners in scoring position with how well he's done it this entire season? I mean, it's something to start testing before we get to the playoffs because that's where we really want to lock in where a guy like that's going to end up being. Then you have Munetaka Murakami at the 4. He's a guy who can create offense by himself. And potentially, if the top 3 go out, starting an inning with Munetaka Murakami doesn't sound all that bad. This is where it starts to get a little dicey. At 5, I have Braden Montgomery. I feel like him and Mydroth are a little interchangeable for me. I think if Mydroth starts to get hot again, especially in September, I think you start to look at him going back to the 5 spot that a lot of us disagreed with early on in the season. Because when Chase is hot, Chase gets really hot. It just happens to be when he's not, he just kind of becomes another guy in the lineup. But overall, over the course of the season, Chase Mydroth has been fantastic with a bat in his hand, so I don't want to take that away at all. And then Montgomery, again, kind of interchangeable. Colson Montgomery, I should say, at 6. While he does strike out a lot, he buys himself so much leeway by being such a good power hitter still. And he does occasionally have moments where he still does show that. It's not where it's completely miserable. I actually had Brett text me his numbers since our last podcast, and they're still terrible. I mean, they're still not good, but he's showing a little bit more. He's batting about 208, I think was about the average that Brett gave me, which is better than what his season average is kind of looking like right now. So that's a guy you want to really get hot in September. He is like a number 1. If anyone gets hot on the Chicago White Sox in September, you want it to be Colson Montgomery because you need that in the playoffs so badly. And then, this is where, you look at Mydroth at 7, possibly Braden Montgomery there. And yeah, I'm going to be the guy to say that Tristan Peters stays at 8 just because, sorry, this is the old school homage of just if it's not broke, don't fix it. And it's so easy to get caught up in wanting offense high in the lineup to get things started hot, but you can't just let it peter off, especially, and Laz, cover your ears, when we have free outs at the catcher position. Having
Hopefully for not much longer
right there is a godsend. It genuinely is. That's why Tristan Peters being right there is great to have. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but Brenton Doyle, not as bad as people would say he has been this season.
Mm-hmm. I just, it's hard for, I get the, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I do get that. I think in a perfect world, like honestly, the best hitter on this team is Miguel Vargas. That is your 2 hitter. I think if they're going to entertain any change, he should be the one getting that extra at bat. There are a few guys I trust more in crucial situations than Vargas. Couple of the commenters, Anna Domini and Hidden Diz, kind of said the same thing about Mooney at 3 or 4. That's fine with me. I wish they could find a way to move Peters somewhere, and I feel like you could do it. And and still not lose someone to turn that lineup over. If Braden Montgomery had to hit down there, for example, or Chase Mydroth still had to hit down there or something. The hard thing is, like, I know why Venable hits Braden Montgomery 5th or somewhere in the middle of the order. He's really good with runners in scoring position, and you trust your top guys to get on. So it's like, I get why he's there. He doesn't try and do too much. I think that was something Vince mentioned in the chat too. He doesn't try and do too much runners in scoring position. He does a good job doing his job. So it's like, it as much as when I said that, I'm like, I'd move Peters up. It's like, it's still fair to make an argument not to move him, because this lineup's actually pretty well constructed when you're talking about against right-handed pitching, to just be able to do damage no matter where you put guys. And like, even it sounds weird. Oh yeah, leave Braden Montgomery 5th, but he hits so well with runners in scoring position, so you kind of get it. The one thing I would prefer, and this is Duke, where you need to close your ears, they got to stop with this Luis Angel Acuna thing with lefties. He's not going to hit in the playoffs. He's going to be a pinch runner in the playoffs, and barely that. Like, let Antonacci get those at bats, unless you're convinced Sam Antonacci is going to sit versus left-handed pitching in October, assuming they get there. You're wasting time not seeing if he can do it, or trying to get him to do it over this next month of the season. Like, it doesn't mean you have to hit him leadoff, but you got to hit him in the lineup. Acuna is doing nothing for you come playoff time, except a defensive sub if needed and a pinch runner. Like, we got to stop trying to make this happen. And it doesn't sound like Antonacci needs the days off. It seems like he might.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the recent ones were actually because they wanted to give him a day off in the 16-day stretch. But Antonacci has started a little bit more against lefties in the last couple of weeks. And in my opinion, he looks a little bit more comfortable at the plate against them. He's slapping a lot more singles the opposite way against lefties, which has been nice to see. And I do think there's something to be said, too, just for the whole lineup construction debate. I think there's something to be said for just the concept of balance as a whole. That's kind of why I like Peters in the current role when he's hitting this well. It's nice to have somebody. I think it was Duke who was saying it, but it's nice to have somebody right next to all those like automatic outs, if you want to call them that, as the catcher. It's nice to have somebody who's actually a threat. You know, you have 2 on, 1 out in the bottom of an inning, and you have Peters batting with like Romo on deck. It's nice to think, okay, like it's nice that it's Peters and then Romo, and not like your second worst hitter and then your worst hitter. That's just the way that I see it. But really, I think I'll let Duke chime in on Acuna. I think other than that, we're mostly on the same page. The only thing that I like take exception to is if you want to move Vargas up because you think he deserves it, that's fine. I actually agree with that. I just don't like the notion that like, Murakami needs, like, he's struggling, he's not doing well, whatever, when it's been a week worth of games. And I think he's pretty unlucky in that week, in my opinion.
No, I think it's more so just with the amount of even when he's going well, with the amount of strikeouts, I would just prefer. I'm a huge believer your best hitter goes to. That's why I'm like, put Peters to. He's your best hitter right now. Maybe Vargas, but like, play the hot hand. If you don't want to play the hot hand as much and you prefer a little bit more balance, fine. Then I'd move Vargas there. I'm a big believer in your best hitter at any given moment should be the 2 hitter.
Yeah, and this is something that could end up being used as, Vargas being used second in September, and then all of a sudden Munetaka gets hot and he's just going to get right back in that spot. But that just hasn't been the case. I would say more than anything, like, I'm not even offended by the Luis Angel Acuna comment because it's true. But I think the biggest thing that's really kind of kept him in the lineup is he doesn't play a bad shortstop. And I think that's like he's not offensive defensively there. And I think that's the biggest reason why they've kept him there. And the speed aspect does play a little bit of a role into it, whatever. But I'm fine with them testing this out right now just to see if he can get his back going a little bit, because when he was hot, he did get really hot. He started so badly that most people wouldn't notice. I know you two both noticed, but like, he did get really hot there for a minute, and I think they're just trying to kind of capture that a little bit more. But yeah, no, in the playoffs, like, it's not like he's going to start. He's going to be a runner. And if he runs, he might end up being a defensive replacement somewhere. That's about the point of it. He's still going to have to get some at bats before we get to that point, though, to at least see if he can do anything productive with a bat. Dude, even if he's just up there in a pinch hit situation, taking bunts, like something, they're trying to keep him active, obviously, because they're prepared to have to use him down the line.
Right. And I'm approaching it more from the standpoint of like, I know when that Cleveland series comes around, you've got Parker Messick in that rotation, you've got Foster Griffin in that rotation, they've got Joey Cantillo still in that rotation. They're going to try and find ways to use lefties, and you need to win those ball games. And I don't want it to be that they didn't give Antonacci enough runway to play against lefties to where in games where you really want to play him against a lefty, he doesn't look comfortable. Nick, to your point, he has looked more comfortable, but I just continue to get as many reps as possible as they're trying to go through this.
Well, and I think down the stretch here, I don't think there's going to be any worry about how much work Antonacci is going to get. I think once we get into the real stretch of things here, Antonacci is going to get every possible at bat he can get. Also, it does help too that you don't play Peters and Doyle in the same lineup. So they're going to naturally have to have Antonacci playing against lefties whenever possible too, because as hot as Peters has been, he is still he's really bad on splits, and you have to keep that in mind. And Doyle is good replacement with that. And he's also very good defensively in center field. And if anything were to happen, God forbid, to any of our other outfielders, when you already have those two in the game, you're really pulling out of the bin to try to find someone as a defensive replacement late in the game.
One small thing I've appreciated that Venables done at least the past few times out is late defensively in games move Doyle to center as a defensive replacement rather than left and leaving Peters in center. Peters' arm stinks. And it does not, like, when it's late in the game, stick that in the left field corner and hope it works out. You need your best two arms in center and right. So I'm glad they have done that appropriately the past couple of times as well. Just a small thing, but
that was actually
besides the one defensive miscue, let's be real, Doyle's really good in center field.
Yeah, that was my main takeaway when the trade happened, or my initial takeaway, I should say, was late in games that defensive outfield with Braden and Wright as well. It's gonna be really, really good outfield, very well rounded, and honestly, like just kind of, I know we're talking more about the whole roster right now, but I kind of feel like if I had to predict that Will Venable is going to basically do nothing about this whole conversation we're having, and that he'll probably keep the lineup pretty much the same, and he probably will use his bench the same way he's using it. Maybe not so much because like if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but also just because he hasn't. One thing I actually like about him is he hasn't overreacted to slumps too bad during the like. It took like a month of Coulson slumping for him to finally move him down the order. Vargas was actually not that great for a week or two after the All-Star break. Peters obviously famously was not good after the All-Star break, and now he's like the best hitter in baseball. So my point is, during all those times, he didn't really do that much, and I actually like that about him because to me it shows that he believes in his players, but also is like he's just an even-keeled guy, and it kind of shows in many different ways, I think.
It's a long cry from like the rebuild days. I don't know if it was a Grifol thing or just a rebuild thing. Even LaRussa was kind of like it a little bit of just different lineup every day. Certainly not advocating for that, even though I've probably advocated for the most lineup changes.
People nuts.
But it was a different lineup every day for the most part. And at a certain point, you're like, as a player, like you want to get a little comfortable in a routine. And I appreciate Venable's willingness to do that. I do agree with that completely.
Yeah. But I mean, breaking news as Nick broke it down though. Breaking news, White Sox podcasts are actually all just talking into the void. Nothing will ever change.
No one's listening.
Pretty much.
People are listening to us, but like,
hi, folks at home.
Yeah, hi, folks at home. Like, you're all listening, but we can all do nothing about anything. Like, lift the veil of podcast in general. We're all just talking about things we have no control over.
Yeah, as it turns out, we really don't know what we're talking about.
I've been saying that for months, so years. Jeez.
It's funny because like I feel like we've gone in the wrong order, but we've covered a lot of stuff already. Let's change the tone a little bit here. Sean Burke, pretty tough couple game stretch here. He has been carrying our rotation. There has been no ifs, ands, or buts about that. An argument could be made he's been carrying our rotation even before Davis Martin fell back to earth. We've already kind of talked about the idea of skipping a start. Is there anything more you would want to do with where this rotation's at right now? Because with Sean Burke struggling, it's kind of similar to like when Davis started struggling. You really started to see the reality of the pitching rotation and kind of where we're sitting and the multiple moving pieces. You hear the ideas of bringing guys in, you hear the ideas of bringing guys up. Eric Fetty has a legitimate, very strong voice on Twitter of guys who want him to start again. And honestly, I'm kind of there. But where are we at with some of the ways to kind of pick up the slack here? Because obviously, a guy like Sean Burke's going to miss a start, in theory, because we know nothing. Who's a guy you bring up for that opportunity? I mean, I feel like Drew Thorpe's kind of the obvious one, but who are the guys you're kind of looking at?
I mean, yeah, Drew Thorpe's the obvious one. I don't have a problem with it. I get a lot of crap for being like a Drew Thorpe hater. I'm a Drew Thorpe cautious observer. Like, I'm not a hater.
You're a
I
hater.
I'm not, but it's like I'm not a hater though. Like, I could see it working.
I'm speaking on behalf of Michael right now, and I'm just
I
gonna say
know.
you're a hater.
Like, I could see it working, but I could see it not working. That's where I stand on Drew Thorpe. And Tanner McDougal, I don't know what they decided. That was the weirdest call up, I think, ever in terms of how they handled that.
I say the call up wasn't weird. It was sending him down as fast as they did that.
It was
they didn't use him for like a week.
Yeah, call him up, don't use him, enter in a shitstorm, and then go back down. Like, that's not exactly setting guys up for success. So Thorpe makes the most sense since McDougal's not stretched out. I wish Cannon could give you something more. That was not a good outing. Even though he only gave up a couple runs in 3 innings, like, it was not a great outing out of him. Nothing looked really in sync. The changeup had good moments, but nothing looked like it was drastically improved from the last time we saw Jonathan Cannon. So when you really start going down that list, they have 2 open spots. You fill Martin's role back up accordingly, and you probably do fill it with Drew Thorpe. I know quite a few people in our chat here today have been asking about Thorpe, and I do think that's probably the answer, unless you want to go some piggybacking route with McDougal and Fetty, which I think could work as well if you're concerned about bringing Thorpe straight into the fray. But I don't see why they wouldn't do that at the rate it's going. It feels like his recovery has taken long enough. Like, he should be pretty much ready.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised he's even the night's scheduled starter on Sunday, although there is a TBA for the White Sox on Sunday, so maybe that's in the cards. But I saw Jordan yesterday. I was at the game, but I saw what you tweeted about, like, wanting to give Sean Burke a day, and I'm glad you said that because I was thinking it too. Just the fastball has lost a little bit of life. The command isn't as good. I don't know if they'll skip a start. I mean, I think they probably could. It might just be as simple as giving him an extra day, having someone else like take his spot and he switches with them after an off day. I wouldn't hate seeing a 6-man rotation for September, to be honest, to give all these guys who are near or at their career high in innings more rest. The problem with that approach is you have Castillo and Anthony Kay, who I don't think really
I was just
need
thinking
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Castillo also was not a fan of the Mariners' hijinks. I don't think it was a 6-man. It was like a piggyback situation, but he doesn't like the non-traditional stuff. He just wants to start and pitch, 6 innings or whatever. And he hasn't been doing that, to be fair.
This offseason, when we're talking about the fact that we're going to have Castillo on the roster again because of his contract, I really want to break down how bad that entire situation is because I feel like it just has not gotten the right coverage because holy smokes, Seattle just continues to not know what they're doing with their pitchers if anyone has.
Yeah, but the problem is Castillo has not looked good enough to make those sorts of demands at this point, if I'm being honest. Like, Nick, to your point, if you want to go to a 6-man rotation right now, suck it up, Buttercup, because you have not pitched well enough in your 3 or 4 outings here to make those demands. I do agree that, like, there's the idea of being too unconventional, that if you got too many vets in the rotation, they're not going to respond well. I don't know. It's an interesting idea. I wonder if they can just time it up to where Martin's return and Thorpe's return, they could just skip Burke, not even skip Burke, move him back a couple days, maybe line it up so that he pitches Cleveland. I don't know how it lines up right now. He might already start in Cleveland. But if he isn't lined up to start in Cleveland, maybe push it so that he could be lined up to start there. I don't know. I think you have to try something, right? You have some remaining options. I think what's frustrating is there's not enough options. And I'm not talking, oh, they traded Mason Adams. I'm talking, where's the pitching development been? And we've had that conversation all year. And then you see Hagen Smith throwing 92 in the second inning yesterday, and you're like, what are we doing in Charlotte and Birmingham nowadays? But that's an off-season conversation. You're dealt the cards you're dealt right now. I think they have enough options to try and get creative with what's here while still keeping those who are a little bit more old school is maybe the right word, but a little bit more traditional in terms of how they like to be as a pitcher, giving them the opportunity to stay on those routes.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
I'm on the opposite. Oh, go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
No, just real quick, I wanted to say, like, you could do kind of what we're all saying. You could do this approach for September where you have Burke, Martin, Kay, Castillo, Thorpe, ideally, and then choose your favorite between Fetty and Urquidy. Put the other one in long relief if you want, and I think that's probably a good idea. I mean, there's some outside the box ideas we're not really talking about. Like I saw Uncle Ted in the chat saying, like, what if you started stretching out Grant Taylor and used him as like a 3 to 5 inning guy in the playoffs, like as a starter, which I would love that. I don't think they're going to do it, but that would be really cool in my opinion. But there's other creative stuff they can do. But as long as you don't have like an actual injury and we're just managing fatigue here, then I don't see the argument against calling up someone like Drew Thorpe as soon as this weekend. But if not then probably the series after that.
So I think you have a lot of room to mess around with the fifth guy in the rotation for sure. And honestly, this probably works in the favor of Sean Burke being able to skip a start if need be. But I'm of the opposite approach of you need to find the fifth guy. You need to find if that's going to be Drew Thorpe, if that's going to be Eric Fetty, which honestly, I think Fetty has shown enough to where if you need to fall to him by default, that's a fine option. I'm not worried about that in the playoffs because he wouldn't be one of the three, I guess. But Castillo, Davis Martin, and say Drew Thorpe pitches very well when he gets up here, which, by the way, for those who haven't been paying attention, 14.2 innings pitched, 3.04 ERA, 15 strikeouts, only 3 walks. Drew Thorpe, historically not a big walk guy anyway. These guys need all the starts they can get. I need Luis Castillo to not miss a start because I need to see exactly what I'm going to be getting out of him going into October. Davis Martin, he needs every single start that once he gets back because I need to know what I'm getting out of Davis Martin once he gets to October. And if we are bringing up a guy like Drew Thorpe, let's say he gets hot, like hot, and he actually does start to kind of squeak in that conversation of who the third starter could be. I need to see every bit of him as well. Especially on a major league level, I need to see him face as many major league at-bats as well. So no matter what the White Sox decide to do, and this opens up to Sean Burke being able to miss a day because then you could sneak in another arm in there to be able to kind of test the waters a little bit. But like, I don't want any of these guys to miss starts. So I'm a little against the 6-man rotation per se because I don't want an opportunity for one of these guys to potentially get it going because yes, Luis Castillo has not been good with the White Sox. That one start kind of has me still feeling like there's enough gas in the tank that if we get him into the playoffs where he's been historically very good, maybe him getting hot towards the end of September could really benefit us going into the playoffs. And he could be a third guy you could actually kind of hang your hat on. And we need to see what Anthony Kay can continue to do because Anthony Kay did have he really had a hot month and a half, 2 months. He's quiet. He started quieter, but he's really strung them together, which has made it a lot louder. But Anthony Kay has had struggles in this season, so we need to continue to see that that's going to move in that direction as well. Now, I mean, I want to be mindful of pitch count here, but this is like full display, final auditions for the third guy in the rotation at this point because I'm feeling really good about Sean Burke being our game one starter. Feeling pretty good about Anthony Kay as a number 2 at this point. But that number 3 is up for grabs, in my opinion. Davis Martin feels like the most rational decision, but Davis has been so bad that we need to see him turn that around before we can give that to him either. And Luis Castillo has the history, and Drew Thorpe is a wild card. Or any guy you bring up is the wild card. So I want to see innings from these guys.
What's crazy about like the K conversation, I agree. There is a very clear like open tryout for your top 3 in this rotation come October. K has a 3.5 ERA over his past 12 starts. And if you wanted to extend it a little bit farther out, it's never getting above like a 3.8 since we're going back to now May. Like he has been pretty darn good in giving the White Sox what they were looking for out of that signing, and then probably some. Um, I keep looking at there are these pitching struggles we all have to be talking about and be accounting for. Um, and you have to recognize them. And you also have to sit here and be like, okay, it's maybe just not quick replacements and keep the status quo on everybody. Like while you both were talking, I kind of mapped it out just strictly based on starting every 5th game. Burke missed the Cleveland series. And I don't think that's what you want to do. So I think you need to find a way to back him into that series. Like you need to win those ball games. You need to put as best as you can without screwing things up with other guys. You need to have 2 of your best 3 starters in those games. You can't go bullpen day, Anthony K. That you're setting yourself up for failure.
That
So
rhymed.
yeah, I don't know why I ended up doing it that way, but I'm glad it worked out.
A little bit. Go ahead.
But the whole point being, you have to start treating these like playoff series and lining yourself up for not only the playoffs, but lining yourself up for, you got to get yourself to the playoffs at the same time, right? It's interesting when we talk about all of these problems. I think this team actually lines up pretty well in a short series, like 3 or 5 games. Like you can just stack pitching and be fine. Like they have enough to mix and match with, do different matchups, stuff like that, without anyone being overwhelming. It's when you get to those 7-game series, you're like, oh shit, this gets a little bit tougher. I don't know if anyone has strong opinions on their top 3 right now come playoffs. If season ended today and they needed 3 guys, but I think at the very least we can say Sean Burke is one of them. And you should be doing whatever it takes to set him up for the games you need to win to get yourself to those sorts of playoff conversations.
Yeah, to me, it's definitely Burke and Anthony K would be 2 of the 3. And then in terms of who's the third, I mean, I kind of need to see more, like Duke was saying. I want to see how Castillo looks, how Davis Martin looks, how they looked throughout the month of September. And that's when I will actually have a better opinion. Because if Castillo is like this and it's, 3-4 weeks from now, then unfortunately, I don't think you have him start a, potential division series game. But if he's like even 75% of what he was in that start against the Reds, then great. That's your 3. And you even then still have the flexibility to use like a Drew Thorpe or Davis Martin as your potential 4 in that series. So I can't help. I'm glad that Jordan said what you just said about like this team actually might be set up pretty well for like a 3 or 5 game series, because I can't help but sit here and get a little bit optimistic about like this team's potential to get hot. We talked about it already. Like, what if Coulson returns to his early season form? And, I'm not worried about Murakami, obviously, but what if the lineup starts clicking like that? But you can make a similar argument for the pitching. Like, what if getting these 2 or 3 weeks off is all that Davis Martin needed to get his early season command back? And what if Drew Thorpe hits the ground running? Like, there's a lot of, the pitching on paper is not that good for a playoff team, obviously, but there's a lot of upside that I don't think everyone's properly acknowledging either.
Well, it just goes back to the point of how big September really is for this team in a lot of different assets.
One thing too, and we're having the Davis Martin conversation. Who is this in the chat? I think it's John Densman who's been giving us updates.
The updates in the chat.
We've been getting updates on Martin. 5 innings of 1 hit ball in Charlotte. So that's positive, right? Like it's Charlotte, sure, whatever. But you have to have good outings in Charlotte. Like if you're having bad outings in Charlotte, now we have a real question on our hands. So that's exciting to see at the very least. I think it becomes, for me, the top 3, if I had to guess right now, Burke, K, and they'd probably stick with Castillo. I feel like that's part of why they got him. I feel like that was part of their overall calculus. Do I agree with it? I don't know yet. I think there's still some work to be done on his part to prove it, but also his competition hasn't been doing a great job. Davis Martin has been hurt. Your other competition, I guess, is Drew Thorpe, and he hasn't even been here yet. So, and then Eric Fetty, I guess, too, and all that stuff. But I don't know. It could get interesting where they just mix and match guys at that point. But I don't know. I think it speaks a little bit to the trade deadline, which we don't have to rehash. Like, it would have been nice to get one more, just so you don't have to have these conversations. Didn't have to be a stud, just an arm. And again, we don't have to rehash all of that, but it makes this conversation difficult when your internal development hasn't seen the strides you probably would have wanted it to this season. Coupled with
Especially from
you
the
didn't think you were going to
pitching
compete
side
this
of
year.
things.
Yes, especially on the pitching side of things, where it's like, that was a big concern for me. Is yes, I know you weren't expecting to compete this year, but you got to change with changing information. So it's an interesting situation they're in. Um, we'll have to see.
Yeah. And I mean, my final note on Castillo is kind of dug into him a little bit today. His strikeouts are honestly up from where he's been the last 2 years. He's striking out batters at a good rate. His second time through the order has been absolutely miserable. 360 average allowed in the third inning, and he's given up 7 of his home runs this season in the third inning. So really, it's home runs that are a big problem with him. And somebody said it in the chat, and I agree with it. In a game where we start really falling behind because of Luis Castillo struggling early, let him keep eating some of those innings. Let him wear it. Maybe that's what he needs. Maybe he needs a little bit of I'm getting my ass kicked. I need to get it together. I don't know. But I think we covered it pretty well as far as where this rotation kind of is. It's gonna depend on what the White Sox decide to really do for that 5th spot, as far as who they're going to bring up to kind of compete this month, and then it's going to depend on who's going to be the third guy. And honestly, as a guy who really does like Luis Castillo, I don't think he has that much of a set number 3 in the current build of things, just because I still feel like this team's really high on Davis Martin. And the team is really high on Davis Martin, as we've seen with the clubhouse. So as far as that third guy, it still feels like they're going to probably try to fit him in there. They're going to give him every opportunity to take that third spot. But man, he has to show what he's showing tonight. 5 innings, 1 hit ball, because it was really, really bad there for a while that we just kind of let it keep going.
And Castillo's, I know we're going to be heading out here soon, but just to kind of preview the next couple of days, Castillo's got a good bounce back opportunity tomorrow. He is starting. That's a pretty big ballpark. You can probably keep it in that ballpark for the most part. You'd hope so.
Yeah.
And see what happens there. That would be a nice bounce back. You got Castillo, Fetty, and then Nik, as you mentioned, no one announced on Sunday. If they want to go back to Urquidy, they could. I don't know if they're going to want to. You hope it wasn't just a flash in the pan, but the probability is that he probably was. So maybe you let Thorpe try and start that. I wouldn't be opposed to it. It's just more about, does it make the most sense for him, and trying to set things up. Again, I'm still looking at this from the standpoint of, how do you set things up for Sean Burke to be starting one of those Cleveland games? I think right now it is a miss for him not to be lined up for one of those games. And I think the idea that it's been a rough little bit of a stretch, nothing crazy, but a rough couple of games, clearly some fatigue, career high in innings currently. Find a way to push a start, skip a start, something like that, to just get him to that Cleveland series. I would love to see that, and while helping his health at the same time. And I think what gives Castillo the edge is, Dan Sokolsky said in the chat, he's not afraid to challenge. And I do appreciate that about him. I think that's what gives him the edge when I'm looking at those top 3, is because I know if the Sox are going to lose a game he's starting, it's probably because he just got hit to death, which is fine in my world. Like the games like last night where Sean Burke walks 8 in 3 innings, or 3 and a third, whatever he ended up getting, like, that's not a winning formula. Yeah. If you get hit to death, you get hit to death. That's baseball. But that's what gives me the edge. Well, we'll probably give once they kind of figure out this rotation, like the top 3 guys will be the ones we trust to throw the most strikes. And I think that's probably fair.
Yeah, I
See,
agree
Dan,
with that.
you give Laz a little bit of credit, and he's going to shout you out every time now.
Yeah, I was also going to say, yeah, I did not work at the Score or ESPN 1000. They would not give me that much responsibility in any world. Like, so you don't want to hear my voice that much. An hour a week is probably fine.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with the points you made there. And another guy we haven't talked about is David Sandlin. I mean, he has been really, really up and down when he's been in the majors this year, but the highs have been high enough where, like, I still think there's a good pitcher in there someday. And he's one guy. I mean, didn't he throw 6 perfect innings against the Twins in his debut? Like, maybe use him in one of these Twins games if you really need innings that badly. But I mean, I'll leave this as like my final thought here. We talk a lot about how it's unsustainable on this bullpen to have all these starters going 3 innings and needing the bullpen to cover 6. Like, it's not going to work. And that's true. But in a worst case scenario in the playoffs, if we get to the playoffs and the starting rotation is exactly what it is right now, you could try to be creative where it's like, okay, we're going to give, a Fetty or Castillo like 3 or 4 innings, and then we'll plan to have Sean Newcomb pitch 3 after. That's not sustainable for the regular season, but you could get away with it in the playoffs. I don't want that to be the plan, but they'll have options, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make.
I that's what I do like about this team. So that's why I said, like, in a 3 or 5 game series, they've got enough weird things they can do. Taylor can go a couple innings. Newcomb can clearly go 3 or 4 innings. Like, McDougal could be a part of that. Hagen Smith probably still only gets you 1, but could get you 2. Like, there's enough things you can do. Unfortunately, you're limited to 14 pitchers through September, 13. I believe it's a 13 limit in the playoffs as well for that 26 man. But you're unfortunately limited with the number of arms you can mix and match. But I don't know. I think there's enough here. It's just worth trying it, right? I do think it's worth trying Thorpe over Urquidy. I don't think you'd lose that much, to be honest with you, if Urquidy got DFA'd. I think it's worth continuing to give Fetty a shot. I just, you have to try things while still being like, what is our end goal in sight? And for me, I think the end goal in sight, to keep hammering it home, is how do we set up that Cleveland series as best as possible while still trying to mix and match some other guys and see what Martin looks like, see what Thorpe looks like down the stretch. You can do both of those things, and I just hope they do it. If Burke runs out there on Tuesday in Houston, I'll be kind of upset about it, to be honest with you. It's just, I mean, there are other opportunities to move his start. I just think now would be a great time to do it. But the whole point being, they have a lot of options, and it's a good thing. And I think they have enough options to kind of work through some of these pitching struggles we've been seeing.
Yeah. Me too. I agree.
Look at that.
No, honestly, I mean, you guys nailed it at the end here. I'm just going to go back to kind of what I've been saying through most of this podcast and really throughout most of the year. September is a big month for the Chicago White Sox. It's a big month to get things honed in, to get the guys that you're going to have, you really start getting an idea of what your playoff rotation is going to be and how we're going to utilize pitching as well. Because I think no matter who you put into that third rotation spot, you have to have the bullpen ready for that day in particular without completely burning out, unless there's the off chance we sweep, which not going to hold my breath on that. We need to get to the playoffs first. But overall, I think it's gonna be really interesting to watch, and I'm really excited to get into September because it feels like we're getting closer to the finish line of this team's, went from a fluke to a good run to running the AL Central to keeping atop the AL Central. And now we're hitting the point where we're starting to think about what the White Sox look like as a playoff team. And September is going to do a lot to say what that team is going to look like and what type of momentum we're going to have going into the ballpark, because I am really excited about the idea of having a playoff game on the south side of Chicago again, as everybody should. But
feel the momentum. Brooks Boyer gets his royalties for me saying that, I believe.
White Sox Facebook is not pleased you just brought up Brooks Boyer. No, but anyway, unless you guys have anything else, I think that's a good spot for us to stop. Because it is the dog days summer, which means the dog days of White Sox podcasting as well, and we are just drenched in sweat about how just brutal these podcasts have been. We're working our asses off over here. But anyway, good with the chat. Dan, Uncle Ted going crazy in the chat as always. Obviously I see a lot of similar names in the chat. If this is your first time listening to the podcast live, hit that notification bell on YouTube. You'll be able to go live with us every time. You'll be able to talk trash to us. You'll be able to tell us, you'll be able to keep us updates about what's happening in the minor leagues live or what's happening in other baseball games around the league. So always appreciate you guys. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have this week for the Sox On 35th podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere else you get your podcasts. Hit that hype button too if you can find it. I still can. Also, be sure to check out the website, soxon35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at soxon35th to stay up to date with your Chicago White Sox. This has been Duke Coughlin, joined by Jordan Lazowski and Nik Gaur. This has been my flu game. We'll be back as we cover another week of White Sox baseball. Thank you, and go Sox.
Thanks for spending your off day with us, everyone. Go Sox.
Go Sox.